This is a map of the Indo-Aryan language family, or the Indo-Aryan language family of India. And you can see the different colored zones showing the different subgroups of the language family. And this language grouping is important for what is known as the Aryan invasion theory. I have some problems with the theory of the origin of these languages, where they originated, and how they were spread. Now, the idea here is that these language groupings are all related, and that they all descend from a proto-language known as Proto-Indo-Aryan or Indo-Aryan. This language was a single language, this proto-language. You could think of it as a parent language, and the rest of these language groupings are like the children that descended from that proto-language. And the way that this happens is the proto-language, you can think of it sort of as a trunk of a tree or the stem of a bush. Maybe that's more correct. And each branch of this language family would come from this trunk or stem. As the speakers of the language would move away from the center of origin and become isolated from other speakers. In that way, they would start diverging, picking up new words, maybe through contact with other speakers of other languages, or just coining new words on their own, and drifting away from each other in terms of the phonology and the way they pronounce things, and also in the vocabulary and such. And so here, as they move away, as these branches form, you have new sub-languages that form up, which eventually themselves will break into further groupings of languages. And these are the zones you see here on the map that constitute the branches of the Indo-Aryan language family. Now, typically you would see these languages disperse generally in a uniform fashion from the center of origin. That would be the simplest way to explain how the language groupings would form. People would just move away naturally from the center, and unless there was some geographical or other barrier, it would be generally type of a uniform type of distribution. So we can see here in India that all the Indo-Aryan languages, the sub-language groupings, are in India, with the exception of one grouping, Dardic, which is partly in Afghanistan. And you would have to also eliminate some of the outliers, like Romani and Damari, which resulted from the migration of people from India many centuries ago toward the Middle East and Europe. But even those languages are thought to have originated in this area of South Asia. So if you were to try to find the center of dispersal with the languages that you see on this map, it would be more or less somewhere in this area here. But according to the Aryan invasion theory, all of these languages originated outside of India or South Asia, India, Pakistan, this area of Nepal, Bangladesh. Instead, they originated entirely, according to this theory, in Central Asia, or possibly in Afghanistan. But none of them, you can see, are natively found there today, or were they there historically that we know of in written history. So that, if you were to accept that explanation, all these languages divided, all these language families, these sub-language families of Indo-Aryan, divided in the prehistoric period, and they all just somehow migrated entirely into the Indian subcontinent. My idea is that that's highly unlikely, and then they left no traces in their original homeland. Because according to the theory, these are all separate branches. Each of these zones, these linguistic zones, they all evolved separately from Proto-Indo-Aryan. And so they would have had to have come on their own, migrating from Central Asia into South Asia, and then disappearing in Central Asia. But the more, I think, simpler explanation is that these languages, the proto-language for this family, was located in the Indian subcontinent, probably in this area here. And then they dispersed naturally in each direction. And you can see this would look like a very natural distribution of the languages, using the simplest type of explanation. And that is, of course, a problem for the Indo-Aryan invasion theory, which suggested that a single language of one of these related to these other languages, not the ancestor of any of them, but the single language was involved in an invasion of the Indian subcontinent, supposedly resulting in the dispersal or the migration of that language, and I would guess all these other languages from Central Asia into the Indian subcontinent. But I think that there's problems with that. It's just not a very plausible solution or theory in terms of the origin and dispersal of these languages.